I do not have a blind spot when it comes to the biggest college football game of the year, because it has been one that we have circled for months and months and months. And as we welcome in our good friend Bruce Feldman, it is great to see you from Fox Sports.
Great to see you.
How are you, Bruce?
Great to hear you.
This one has not fallen off. It is what we thought it would be. 2 top 5 teams in prime time, both with eyes on the playoffs, both undefeated. Ohio State and Oregon, it's actually here, and it's what we thought it would be.
I hope so.
Wait! You had I saw a little bit of doubt there.
Yeah, here's my problem, and look, the odds makers, it's only a 3-point spread for Ohio State. I think that the game was in Columbus, which it's not. I think it would be somewhere between 7 and 10. Austin's a tough place to play. It's a great environment. Dillon Gabriel would have been my pick. He probably was going into the year to win the Heisman. You have a guy who's played a lot of football, great intangibles, leadership qualities. He's played a lot of big games. He's accurate. The ball comes out of his hand fast. He's mobile. He's very savvy. And all those things, he can light it up the rest of the way. So far, it's been shaky. The offensive line wasn't very good in the first couple of games. It was really shaky. But then what we've seen from him is he's had a bunch of red zone turnovers. I mean, 3 picks in the red zone. That is concerning. He's going to play by far the best defense he's seen, most talented. I mean, Boise State gave him a game, but Boise State gave him a game because they have the best running back in college football, Ashton Jeanty. Boise State's defense is by roughly a middle-of-the-pack defense in the Mountain West. It's nothing like the athletes he's going to see in the front 7. Caleb Downs might be the best defensive player. He might be the best defensive player in the country. I mean, the safety for Ohio State who was at Alabama doing amazing stuff.
I love how we're not talking about him playing running back anymore.
Because they have 2 great ones.
Great running backs. Anyway.
I mean, I think Ohio State's my preseason and current pick to win it all. I suspect we'll see Dillon Gabriel's best game. Maybe we'll see him keep the ball and run it more. They don't need him running against Idaho and Boise or Oregon State. They may need him running the ball against the Buckeyes. He's not a tiny quarterback. I mean, he's not Bryce Young, but he's also not Anthony Richardson either.
No, he's not.
We'll see.
I did the Oregon Boise State game. I was blown away. We all were by Dillon Gabriel in our production meeting. I had never met the guy. He's mature. He's an adult. He is a leader. He gets it both, I think, on a granular, both big and small. How about that, Andrew? I can't speak today. But the right side of the offensive line, obviously heading into that game, was a bit of a mess. To me, there was a question, had Will Stein been telling him not to run? Because there have been some open lanes in the first couple of weeks that they hadn't taken, and he said no, but they also want him to see it, get the ball out quickly. The red zone thing definitely concerns me. I think Will Howard can make plays against those corners as well, those backs. I mean, Quinshon Judkins, his contact balance, his power is absurd. And what impressed me with Ohio State, too, those backs block, those wide receivers block. They pick up blitzes. Awesome. They block on the edge. I do think Ohio State is absolutely the better team, but Oregon, and we saw it in the Boise game, has the chance at any moment for those explosives. Now, do they get them as much as they want to these days? I don't know, but they at any moment can go 90 yards in like that. I think they keep it close, and I think the home stadium can be a factor. And I also don't know that we've seen the best of the Ohio State defense yet.
We haven't. Our crew, Big Noon Crew, had them against Marshall, who's a solid, group of 5 team, right? But Marshall actually did some decent things on offense. It just didn't look like Ohio State was that dialed in. The most optimistic part for me, if I'm an Oregon fan, is Jordan Birch, former 5-star edge rusher, big, physical. He looks like he could be a first-round talent. Derek Harmon, who was formerly at Michigan State, big-time 3 technique. Those guys are playing like top 50 picks right now in the last few weeks. And Ohio State's O-line, which looks very much improved from last year, that last year was a struggle. These guys are good enough and really talented enough at Oregon where they could cause some problems, potentially. because I think they have the stuff to be a high-level D-line, and we're starting to see some of it. But again, Chip Kelly gets a homecoming game, right? He was great at Oregon when he ran the offense. Now, he has never, and I would say including in the NFL with the Eagles or with the 49ers, had receivers quite like this, which may sound crazy to say it. Like, he's had good slots and good tight ends, and he's obviously had terrific running backs. He's not had nothing like J.J. Smith, the 6'3", 220-pound freshman receiver. And I obviously had Deshaun, who could fly, with the Eagles, but Deshaun was a much smaller receiver. I mean, the guys he has at Ohio State, and it's a bunch of them. It's like 5 or 6 guys. Will Howard's not C.J. Stroud, but Will Howard's a big guy who can run and will run. And in that offense, it's a really good scheme. I think this is going to be a really interesting chess match between Chip Kelly's offense with a lot of firepower and a lot of weapons against an Oregon defense that also has speed, but they haven't, they've seen Jeanty. They haven't seen anything like they're going to see in terms of this group.
I'm talking to Bruce Feldman here from Fox Sports, getting ready for the full schedule, obviously, on another college football weekend, but the Oregon-Ohio State game obviously is the big one here with the 2 top 5 teams, both of them undefeated. We're talking to Dan Lanning before that Boise State game, and I specifically asked him, hey, did you bring in, let's say Harmon, for example, did you try to go big on the D-line? Because, hey, we're Big Ten now. Like, we know we're going to face Big Ten rushing offenses, and maybe that's my dad's view of the Big Ten, but you get my point. And he said, no, you got to stop the run to win college football games or any football game. But this run game is different. I mean, Judkins and Henderson, they are different. And Will Howard's kind of like that, call it almost like a run game coordinator. Chip Kelly said he is my run game coordinator. But the talent on the edge there with Tate, who would be a number 1 for most
They're like
teams.
5 number 1
They're
receivers.
all number 1s.
It's crazy.
And then Jermaine Smith, who they will all tell you is as talented a freshman as they've ever had at wide receiver. And that includes every NFL wide receiver right now for Ohio State. He practices like a 10-year vet. He blocks in practice. He never takes his helmet off. He wants to be on punt block team. He could legitimately, do we agree, play in the NFL on a Sunday right now.
Yeah, J.J. Smith is phenomenal. I mean, he is, talking to Chip Kelly in the spring, people were like, he was kind of guarded. Hey, maybe, they are awed by what he could do. He's an 11-foot broad jump guy. He's stronger physically. They loved Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, the NFL did too. Marvin wasn't as strong as this kid. He probably isn't as explosive as this kid. And he played at a high level and has, insane work ethic. And I have a story coming out about him later this week about his focus and attention to detail, and it is rare. And look, Brian Hartline, who was a really good former receiver at Ohio State and then NFL receiver, has had the best receiver room in college football in a long time. Might have a better receiver room than honestly some NFL teams. You usually don't have like 3 number 1s, and you look at the guys they've had there at one point, and now. Jackson Smith and Jigba is a terrific all-around receiver. You mentioned they all block. I think that's the culture of that room that he has got there. And then you add this guy, he's a rare talent. Like a couple of weeks ago was the game Ryan Williams went national. He's the super fast 17-year-old receiver at Alabama when they beat Georgia in the kind of game of the season. This could be the J.J. Smith, the catches he's already made. He
made those catches before Ryan, like an hour before Ryan Williams that night. Yeah,
just not on quite as big a stage.
Correct.
But again, not a knock on Caleb Downs. I caught myself and go okay, Caleb Downs is probably the most talented defensive player they got because I know who's on the other side of the ball. And I just know what people say about him. He's just really different. And to say that, considering all not just guys who played at Ohio State were terrific there, and then, the guys who are excelling in the NFL, like Terry McLaurin, like they have guys who are check all the boxes in terms of speed, separation, toughness, intangibles, work ethic, attention to detail. Now you put it into this guy who's bigger and stronger and just different.
Yeah. Everyone we talked to at Ohio State said, he's the best. Like all the names you just listed. Yeah, he's he's the best. And he doesn't turn 19 until the day before the Michigan game. Think about that.
It's going to be quite an ugly birthday present for Schuler Moore and Rich Eisen.
The day before the Michigan game. We got Penn State USC this week. Want to get to that one as well. SC's got 2 losses now. What happened against Minnesota happened. If they run the table, do they have a shot? Can they still get in?
If they could. I mean, they were going to have Notre Dame late in the year. USC, Penn State's undefeated. Penn State has a talented team. I think Penn State's a playoff team. I don't know if they're a make noise in the playoff team. We'll see if their offense is truly different. Like, I think Andy Kotelnicki, the new offense coordinator, is a really good hire. He honestly does some of the similar stuff to what Chip does in terms of, it's a lot of tackle overs. It's a lot of stuff that he throws at a defense. And in college football, that's a handful. And he's got really good running backs. And, the quarterback, Drew Aller, especially, has played very well. It's just, can he play very well on a big stage? As far as USC, I thought last week felt like a step back, right? They went to Minnesota. Darius Taylor's a really good young running back who doesn't get enough attention. He looked great last week. Rosemer, the quarterback for Minnesota, is a transfer who's a good player and he's a good fit. And I felt like that was a PJ Fleck kind of game. We're gonna grind it out in a very much a Big Ten kind of way. USC did not have Eric Jeanty, who's like the storkish 6'6", 215-pound linebacker who made a lot of plays going in. They missed him last week. I thought last week was the first time USC's defense did not look dramatically better than it did last year. It's still better. I don't want to dismiss after one shaky week, but Jeanty might not be back this year. I mean, he's had some significant injuries. We'll see if he's able to go or not go. It seems like there's a decent chance they might have to shut him down. Kamari Ramsey's a terrific addition. He played for Danton Lynn at UCLA, came over. He's one of their best players. The area where USC is really lacking is both on the D-line and especially on the O-line. And I think Caleb could overcome some of that because he's Caleb and can do remarkable stuff, extending plays. Miller can hang in the pocket, and Miller Moss is really good. I feel like there are times where it's just like there's a lot on him. He's a quarterback, and he's a really good quarterback, and he's got, Lincoln Riley is a great play caller, but their margin for error is not that big right now. And I think this is because of what we talked about in Oregon. I think this game is not getting enough attention, and obviously USC lost last week. I'm fascinated to see how Penn State travels, not from a fan standpoint, but like how their team does, because this is a different test. I think Lincoln Riley will give them some headaches. I just don't know if USC will be able to protect Miller, because now you got Abdul Carter and Zane Durant is like really underrated. He's an explosive defensive tackle. He's like one of my freaks list guys who's playing lights out. Interested to see how USC responds after last week.
Real quick, we were talking before, Brockman and I were, and Brockman had this attitude. I don't know if the best team's going to win. I'm like, well, it's a tournament. Like, don't we almost ensure that the best team wins because they beat the other best teams?
Do we worry about that in the NFL?
And therefore a tournament. And that's what I said. You never look at the Super Bowl and go, oh, I don't know that the best team actually got through.
Yes, and my point is that the Super Bowl has never, ever been AFC winner, NFC 1 seed, AFC 1 seed.
But does it have to be?
Yes, but college football has always been 1-2. Boom, you play for the title, that's it.
We often debate who 1 and 2 should be, usually 2, who they should be. I guess my question is, do coaches view it differently this year? Is there a different attitude? Oh my God, we lost, but hey, we're still okay.
I think there is something of, we've seen teams go, hey, we're just going to keep getting better. And I think there is something is knowing you have potentially a little cushion to like snap hook one on the driving range, make you feel a little more comfortable.
Good analogy.
As somebody who snapped hook more than my share over the driving range. But I think there is something that probably coaches are a little uncomfortable with, because it is such a departure for, I'm not saying NFL head coaches aren't like this, but you have, that always that vibe about college football head coaches were like they were the small town sheriff.
Yeah.
And they were like all wound up on everything. And now all of a sudden, you have NIL. They don't have as much control as they had before, or anywhere near as much control as they used to have. And now you have this other thing dynamic with the playoff. And I don't know if anybody has a great answer for that yet, right? Like, you got Georgia, who is, with Ohio State, the 2 most talented teams in the country. They have a really bad first half against Alabama, end up losing on the road. Their schedule is really tough. They've had a bunch of off-field issues, including this week with one of their better receivers. I'm not saying the program's out of control. I'm just saying, like, they have a bunch of other tough games. I still think they're a playoff team, but I think, the dynamic would probably feel differently. They may be able to afford another loss and still go, 10-2, possibly 11-2 if they win the SEC title game, if they get in it. But I think there's just a different feel to it, right? In terms of, like, do you have a cushion? Do you not? Like, Notre Dame lost to NIU. That would have been, because it was a 4-team playoff. Hey, you're
done.
You're done. You can't afford that. They might be able to afford it now. I don't think they can afford anything else. I mean, I think after that loss, if you lose somebody else and your schedule is not great, and Florida State stinks this year, who's on their schedule. And again, I just think that that's indicative of you have a lot of different people who have a lot of different realities right now.
Yeah, like in the NFL, let's say the Chiefs win. You don't hear Bengal fans going, you know what, we beat them in September. We deserve to be the... No, you're not. They won, right? And in college football, you do have that sometimes. But to me, hey, if they make it through the playoff and they win, then they win. Like, it's fair for once, at least my opinion. We went to break, and I said Kyle McCord for a Heisman. He is not going to be in the conversation, I don't think.
He's 300-1
for Heisman. But it is great to have a Syracuse quarterback who's throwing touchdowns, and you were there in person. When you talk to Bruce Feldman, when you talk to those in the know and those are already looking ahead to next year for the draft, how do they rank the quarterbacks?
It's an interesting field. There's a lot to like about, like, Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, who's continued to get better. People love his toughness. They think his leadership qualities. He can run. He's got a good live arm. He's gotten better at cutting down the turnovers. It's not last year's class by any stretch. So you got Shedeur Sanders, who has a bad offensive line, but is tough and smart and accurate. You certainly have Beck at Georgia, who people really liked, and he's had some shaky moments. He does not have a great group of receivers. Obviously, there's no Brock Bowers there anymore. There's nobody close to Ladd McConkey there right now. He's playing really good defenses often. People I talked to last year about this group coming up thought he was the guy who could be first pick in the draft. I'm not saying he can't be, but right now it's been shaky. There's a few other guys who are like kind of those. Every year now, you go back to Joe Burrow, to Jaden Daniels. There's a guy who people are like, whoa, all of a sudden now he's a top 5 pick. Nobody was talking about him a year earlier in that kind of tone. And so you go through it, and there's some guys like Connor Wegman is a good example. It's Texas A&M, looked really bad, got hurt, somebody else stepped in, Marcel Reed, a younger quarterback who can run. And then last week he looked great when they blew out Missouri, who was a top 10 team at the time. Looked like the guy that some of the coaches I've talked to think, oh, he could actually be a first-round talent. They saw it. And then you start kind of going through the list of quarterbacks who, like, have the chance. Quinn Ewers obviously played a lot of football. He's got a really good arm. I think he has continued to get better and better. Now we're going to see him this weekend against a good defense from Oklahoma, probably one of the better defenses Oklahoma's had in the last 15 years. He hasn't, he's been hurt the last couple weeks, but looked really good, I thought, against Michigan. He's somebody who's definitely in the first round conversation. Arm talent's always been really good. I think people like the development of him all the way around.
But is he in the top 5 conversation?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's people who come away, and this is not fair to him, but I think one of the things that is tough was when you get kind of tagged with what he got tagged coming out of high school. He was the highest ranked quarterback in the modern recruiting era, and that's by like the internet sites. It's not to say he wasn't talented, but also it's like there's a lot of stuff that was kind of sort of unusual. He really didn't have a senior year. He ended up going up to Ohio State. There's a lot of talk about the NIL situation that was part of why he went up to Ohio State. I don't think he really ever had a chance to compete for the job. It was kind of a weird situation. Then ends up going back home to Texas, where I think it was a good move for him. He gets to work with Sark. He gets to work, around some really good receivers, which obviously they've had and they still have. Now it's a different group. And, like it's all in front of him right now. Like the guy I saw against Michigan who has a talented defense with a lot, good D-line and one, high-level cornerback, he looked really good. I mean, if he keeps playing like that against the SEC defenses, who knows? There's a bunch of guys who end up as top 5 quarterbacks. Sometimes you're like, yeah, how did that happen in retrospect? So I think there's way less talent. I think there are guys who don't throw it as well who've ended up in the top 5 before. Again, I wouldn't give up on Beck at Georgia. He's really smart and he's got a good arm, and I think he sees it well. And I think they ask him to do some things. Again, it's not like one of these offenses where it's a pad your stats kind of system. So you got Shedeur. I don't know. Shedor's going to be an interesting evaluation because he has really good receivers, obviously with Jimmy Horn Jr. and Travis Hunter, but the offensive line is so bad. And it's better now than it was, but it's still really bad, right? And the defense has gotten a lot better, but still, he's taken a pounding. He's tough. He's smart. He throws a good deep ball. You have a wild card in Milroe at Alabama, who's blazing fast. He's really strong. He's built like a running back or a linebacker. He throws a really good deep ball, and I think he's going to keep blossoming with Kalen DeBoer. He also has by all accounts from what DeBoer told me, great work ethic. Shedeur, I think he's a first-round quarterback. I know some people who've coached against him are kind of mixed. They've seen some bad stuff. Again, and some of the bad stuff is I just think he's just, I don't want to say he's just gets under assault in these games, right? They don't run the ball well. They may try to run it a little more now than they did before, but it's just such a different thing with him. Again, Dart wouldn't surprise me if he rocketed up draft boards. He's got a ton of talent, and he does have a good group of receivers, and Lane knows what he's doing offensively. Dart, I wouldn't sleep on Jackson Dart.
We got a minute left here. I got to see Ashton Jeanty in person at Oregon. We know what he did week 1. We know what he did last week as well. The guy is unreal. At Boise State, however, can he win the Heisman?
It's going to be really tough. It's hard for any running back to win the Heisman. The highlights of him are remarkable. Him breaking 6 tackles. He's
when
incredible.
They know he's getting the ball.
Yeah, it's not like all of a sudden he's got Kellen Moore back there either. I'm not saying he's a one-man show, but you're watching him break 6 tackles, and he's got great balance. He's super strong. He's explosive. He's got really good hands. Talk to our friend Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl. They really like him. There's a lot to love about him. He's the best running back in college football. Whether, if you ask me, Travis Hunter should be the Heisman guy right now because he's just unicorn stuff. But at the very least, Jeanty deserves to be, if he keeps up with this, at the Heisman, with one of those other 3 or 4 guys.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.